And while we're waiting maybe for a couple people, Kim, would you mind maybe giving a little bit? I hate putting you on the spot, but would you mind maybe just giving where you were digging last and a part of what type of a setting, and did you find anything interesting, that type of stuff? Do you mind?
No, I don't mind.
Yeah.
So I've been digging at Tel Shimron. It's in the Jezreel Valley, across the valley from Megiddo, if some of you recognize that name, pretty close to Nazareth. It's kind of on the tip of the Nazareth Ridge that goes out into the Jezreel Valley. Tel Shimron Excavations is co-directors are Dr. Daniel Master, who's a professor here at Wheaton and one of John's colleagues, and then Dr. Mario Martin, who was associated with Tel Aviv University and now is at a university in Austria, I believe. And I've been there now. I've dug for 4 seasons there. The tell is fairly large, and so we are digging in a number of time periods. So there's a group that's digging in Middle Bronze domestic area. There's a group that's digging in late to early Roman period. There's a group that's digging in the Iron Age. We have plans to, we've got a group, they didn't dig this year, but that's more in the Hellenistic period. They're hoping to do some Islamic Mamluk if we get to go this coming summer. And I dig in Middle Bronze up on the Acropolis, the top of the Tell, and we're in very, we call it monumental architecture. So it's very large, probably a public type of building. We still have that question. You asked if we found anything. A lot of times we can't fully describe what we're finding because 1, we're still figuring it out, or 2, we need to wait till it's published. But we had a news release this summer, and so if you go on your computer and you look up Tel Shimron Arch, you should see a number of publications from the Israeli newspapers. Biblical Archaeology Society has, and there's a number of other posts from people. So what we uncovered was a passageway between 2 very large mud brick walls that are very well preserved, which is very unusual. Usually you only have foundations for them, and these are preserved probably about 6 meters high. And in a passageway between the walls, we uncovered a arch. It's called Corbel Vault. It's a type of early arch architecture. I believe it's the only one that's been found in the area of Israel. And we were able to dig into it, but we were stopped by kind of a wall of boulders, which made it unsafe to dig in that direction. So we've got our work cut out for us to try to figure out exactly what the wall was. Is a city wall, it's a building wall that's connected with, and where does it go? So
Wow.
that's my story from the last couple years of digging.
Very good. And you're typically there for how many weeks, summer?
6 weeks.
Okay.
The full season runs 6 weeks. We get volunteers that come for the full 6 weeks. Some come for just 3 weeks. They have a 1 week, I would call it more of a tourist dig, but they'll dig for us for a week, and they'll come. They have lectures scheduled especially for them, and they do some special tours for that group, and they stay in better accommodations than we do. But give somebody who would like an archaeological experience but isn't ready to commit to 6 weeks or doesn't have the 6 weeks, they've tried that out, and that's been pretty well received.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The arch she's talking about, usually arches eventually develop with the use of the keystone. So the bricks are like this, and they go like this and like this and like this, and then there's the keystone at the top. The corbelled vault that they found is the precursor to that, and they build with bricks kind of closer and closer and closer together this way until they hit at the top. So it's the precursor to the Keystone Arch. And again, only a couple have been found, and not from this earlier period in the southern Levant. So,
Wow.
But if you do Tel Shimron excavations, no, if you do Tel Shimron Arch, Dr. Master did a video, and it runs about 6 minutes, has all pictures, so you can see what it actually looks like.
So for those of us not familiar or haven't refreshed our memory on periods of time, in years, where are we talking? What time periods do we suspect people lived in that location for how many thousands of years?
Middle Bronze. So they're thinking this material is like between 1800 and 1500, something like that. It's roughly the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
And then was it populated for several thousands of years, or you're not quite sure yet?
Oh, we figure there's probably been continual occupation. We've only found the earliest so far we've uncovered is Middle Bronze, but in the Jezreel Valley itself, there are evidences of early bronze, which is even earlier than that in the time period. We just haven't gotten that deep to see if we can uncover evidence of that time period.
Very good. You may have any thoughts or questions before we move on to just our normal business for the call? Oh, okay. Welcome, Mark Tucker and Lillian Stair. I can see your names, but I can't see your faces, and that's totally fine. You can stay as is. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to take this moment just to cover a couple things, kind of laid it out in an email I sent 30 minutes ago. I just wanted to first go over the information that I sent out in the email, see if there's any other questions people have. I tried to be as specific for a number of different circumstances as possible, and then see if there's any questions about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the rescheduling process, how a new trip might be affected based on what's going on over there currently and what might be happening a year from now. And then we'll just hopefully get some word out toward the end of November with maybe some specific dates or a better idea of what we're looking at. So that's kind of the agenda. Let's first talk about the email I sent out. Number one, I just wanted to, I don't know if anybody else, I know Toby, you're disappointed. I think everybody's disappointed. Okay. So putting that aside, but also watching the evening news, there was a growing sense of, oh, I'm not sure this is going to get better over there anytime soon, which kind of put a little bit of a decision-making process within John and I's, purview. And in just discussing, we had a deadline coming up tomorrow that would have been an airline ticket purchase, and that upped our non-refundable, fees that would have been, and airlines not all the airlines were refunding. Some were giving credits and some were, crediting for future flights. And it was just going to get really complicated. And Rick over at Imagine Tours was pretty sold on the idea that this is probably going to affect trips going into February, even though we could have moved forward had we wanted to. I just felt like it was probably better to get that decision out of the way sooner when non-refundables were lower and less complicated. So that was kind of the decision-making process that I took, discussing with Rick and John as well. So with that said, the email went into several specifics. Ultimately, what you need to know is if you're still at the $500 payment and you didn't pay any more than that initial deposit, you can choose to leave that in place. It'll become your deposit for the next trip if those dates end up working for you, whatever we come up with, and you'll get access to all $500 worth of that money. If you've paid more than that $500, you have the ability to be refunded everything but the 500 and have that remain as a deposit. You have the option of, if you've paid in full, locking in the price of the current trip and not paying whatever the new trip is going to cost. Likely not a terribly high amount, maybe a couple hundred, $250 more was his guess, not knowing specific dates and everything. And if you're just not interested and it's time to bow out, that 300 non-refundable applies now or even down the road. Now that we've postponed and are rescheduling, you can get that non-refundable deposit and cancel at any time moving forward. So hopefully that was pretty clear in the email, but are there any other questions that anybody has regarding that? I'll just say for the video, for those that didn't have the chance to join us, if there are any obviously available via email or over the phone, feel free to give me a call. I'd love to talk through any specifics. One of the reasons I use Imagine Tours and Travel is because they are very understanding, and it's not a big corporation. It's a family-owned business. So if you're able to call there, you're the one that has the contract directly with them, and they will try and work with you. If you propose a scenario, they may be flexible, they may not be. Those are not my decisions to make, but the rescheduling was clearly outlined in all the contracts that you guys signed and agreed to when you started this whole process. So hopefully that's clear. Talking about rescheduling, Rick gave us some windows that we can't go any earlier than looking at the beginning part of next year, just because all the time slots and trips are full. Those may get canceled right along the way, but then we couldn't go then anyway if they're getting canceled. So we're looking at the first part of next year, and John and Kim have a couple things that they're looking into that might affect when that January, February, March time frame, when it might fit best for them. And we're going to have to wait probably until mid-November or late November for them to kind of get a feel for their other commitments. And then once they are kind of locked in and have decided what that looks like for them, John and I will sit down and figure out what might be a good option for us to travel. So we'll get that out to you via email first. If it's worthy of another Zoom call at some point to kind of answer more questions at that point based on what we know then, happy to schedule one of those at that point as well. So any thoughts, any input people might have about rescheduling, or whether, I know it's kind of hard not knowing dates. It's kind of hard to say, hey, I'm all in, but my hope would be that you'd be able to at least stick with us through the scheduling of the new tour and then kind of make a decision at that point. It's really no, yeah, go ahead, Toby.
Yeah, that's the only question I had is how much time will we need to decide what option we want?
Oh, yeah.
Are we going to be like, we need to decide like sometime in the next week, next days, next whatever?
Yeah, good question. Ultimately, if it involves more money than the $500 deposit, you might want to talk to Rick about those circumstances for you personally. If it just involves the 500 deposit, you have until 100 days before departure, okay, same as this trip. So you could literally let that sit there, cancel at any time during this next year prior to 100 days, and it's still the same $300 non-refundable fee for canceling at that anytime during that.
Yeah, I paid for the whole thing plus trip insurance, so out a little money. So,
yeah.
But the other question, if Bonnie, who I was going to go with,
Yeah.
my friend, she probably will not go, and if my husband decides to go and wants to go, do you think there'll be places for that to happen? Are you like, I know you don't know who's going to still continue, but will the numbers be about the same, or what are you thinking?
John and I have not talked about that. My idea would be I generally prefer smaller groups rather than larger groups. That's just once you get to like 50 people, it seems like you're stopping for the bathroom all the time. So, and we just move slower, and you can see fewer sites, and the quality of the trip is just a little bit different with a larger group. So, my preference would be kind of stay in that same 25 to 35 people, and we may have some people drop, and we may have some new people join along the way, and so that would allow for like your husband to join the trip, and you two could probably share a room even. How about that? Yeah, good. Excellent. Any other thoughts or questions?
I would just add that it's obviously it's disappointing for all of us. I know that a number of you have probably waited a lifetime for this trip, and to have it kind of fall apart like this because of political situations is just very, very hard to take and very disappointing. But we can really hope and pray that things will get patched up, and the year will go quickly. And I hope that for those of you who have been waiting for so long for it, that you'll still be able to check off that thing on your bucket list.
Yep. And like I said, it kind of opens up the opportunity for maybe other people that weren't considering this particular trip this next year, maybe a year out might actually work for them. So we can kind of talk through some of those scenarios as well. So ultimately, your contracts are with Imagine Tours and Travels. So the specific details of your situation, you're going to need to communicate that directly with them. And again, I was able to talk to Rick because he was the only one in the office when I called on Thursday, and he's a great guy. His son, the family, it's a well-run business, so you should be able to work through any specific scenarios that you might want. He also mentioned, just to show what kind of flexibility there might be, he mentioned if somebody cancels now and takes that $300 non-refundable hit to their bank account, but decide later to go on the next trip, they might be able to do like a double early bird discount or something. Like, it's not going to be the full 300, but they might be able to work with you. Again, they're in a business that pays well to treat people well, and they have done a good job on all my previous trips. So any other thoughts?
Greg, question.
Yes, go ahead, Debbie.
So we put our $500 deposit down, and we plan to just keep it there for the next trip. Do we have to call Imagine in that case, or do we just continue on as normal?
Yeah, so everything's probably just on pause until we get final word as to what the new dates are. And then once the new dates are there, you will want to communicate directly with Imagine Tours at that time. And that can be a phone call or an email, just so you have, I'd probably do an email if it was me, just so I have written record of what's going on. And just let them know, hey, here's the scenario. We had this, we'd like to do this for this new trip and on these dates. And they'll confirm, and then you just have a kind of a record for it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? No. John, anything? Kim, anything else that you might mention about? Kim, it sounds like you're still kind of now wondering if you're going to be able to go over and dig this summer based on this, situation over there.
Yeah, it's not just whether the archaeologists will go, but we need a volunteer corps to be able to go as well. And schools might decide that they don't want to send their students, those types of risk management issues. So we're in a wait and see mode ourselves.
Yep. So what might a new trip itinerary, how might it look a little different? We weren't going to Bethlehem, which is a Palestinian controlled area, the Palestinian Authority. That's still correct, John, right? Palestinian Authority in Bethlehem.
Yes.
I've been there maybe on half my trips, or maybe a third of my trips. I've been to Bethlehem, not very often. We had, so we likely won't be going there in the next trip. We weren't going there this time. We had a trip scheduled for Shilo, which is in the West Bank. My first trip back in 2004, we had to switch into a bulletproof bus to get there because there had been some sniper attacks previous to that, like 2001. And then everything cleared up, and we've just been doing normal buses since then. I suspect that may be in question on the new trip, but we can fill it in with another site that's within Israel proper that would be just as interesting. Well, maybe not just as, but it'll be very interesting as well. And then we had a couple sites up in the north area that, depending on how things are going on with Lebanon at the given moment, Ceaserea Philippi, Tel Dan, places like that, Golan Heights. We might choose to skip those in the next trip just based on how things are going at the time. So, and we won't know that until we kind of get there or get closer. So other than that, we're going to be seeing most of the same sites, and it's a great trip. So, yeah.
Yeah, every trip I've gone to, we've gone to Bethlehem. So I've been there many times. And the last trip I went on, we actually stayed in a hotel in Bethlehem for several nights. And so that really wasn't, I mean, Bethlehem, even though it's under the control of the Palestinian Authority, they really thrive on tourism. So it's generally a very safe place to go.
Yeah, and my experience has been really varied when I've gone in. My first trip, we had to get off the bus. Our tour guide couldn't come with us. We had to go into taxis that the olive wood shop people sent for us. And it was a little different. Other times our bus just drove right through, and we got to keep our Israeli tour guide, and then we were joined by a new one. You have to hire a new one generally when you go in there, a Palestinian. So I've had, good experiences, but very different experiences every time I've gone in. So, all right. Well, if there's any other questions, speak now. I'm still excited. I'm always excited to go to the Promised Land, and Israel is always on a bucket list for me, even though I've been there several times. So I hope that we can decide on a time, a new time, new schedule in a timely fashion, that we can get over there and retain as many of you as possible in the process, and maybe welcome some new people in that weren't able to go on this one, and just have a trip of a lifetime as well. I know life has been going on for everybody, but my mom broke her hip 2.5 weeks ago, and we are in rehab, and we're going to a care facility later in the week. And so my days have been really busy with that. And I'm sure life has gone on for everybody else as well. So, yeah, I just wanted to give that an update because that affected our first Zoom call. All right. Anything else? Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'll get this email, or I'll get this video out hopefully in the next day, by tomorrow, and we'll go from there. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
You can throw them away.